Hello and welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community. And the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today is our special guest, my friend, Michael Tunnell.
Hello.
How are you, Michael?
Doing awesome. How about you, Rocco?
I am doing good, dude. I got coffee, and we're going to talk about Linux and maybe get
Best
into
combo.
something of you.
Maybe.
Slightly.
It's possible.
Well, I'm looking at the listing of all of the links. And I only did half of the links that you actually have, and it's more than any other show combined. So
Probably. I'm not surprised by that. No, I probably have multiples of each one too.
So you're pretty much everywhere in the Linux world, in the Linux community. And I would think that there aren't too many people out there that don't know who you are, but maybe they don't know you personally. So who is Michael Tunnell personally?
Well, I mean, I'm a Linux enthusiast at the foremost, and from Southeast US, Alabama specifically. I'm a sci-fi and comic book nerd also, and I could talk for hours on all of those topics. And I'm a Rocket League extraordinaire.
We knew that. We knew all of that.
Right?
So, Michael, what do you do for a day job?
I'm a designer and marketer mostly, but I also dabble in a variety of other things like writing for technology websites like How to Geek and stuff like that. But I do a lot of different things. Like there's not an individual thing that I would call myself other than designer and marketer, I guess. But I like to try doing a lot of things.
Very nice. Do you have any other hobbies outside of Linux? I mean, you mentioned comic books and sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, I like watching sci-fi movies and TV shows, and even going back and watching stuff I already watched, like Star Trek. You know, there's at least every couple of years or so you have to go through at least an entire series of Star Trek. It's like a requirement. Apparently.
Really?
Oh, well, I think so.
I must have missed that requirement.
Well, we'll fix that. But yeah, I also like comic books and read graphic novels and stuff, and also, talk about graphics novels as, much as possible. And I definitely play Rocket League way too much. I might need an intervention. So that's okay. I'll skip the intervention and just keep going. But yeah, I think that's the majority of my hobbies are mostly like related to Linux. Like I enjoy Linux as my main thing because I enjoy writing scripts and I enjoy the community around it, making videos around it, podcasts around it, all kinds of stuff. So really, my hobby is Linux for the most part. Like I'd say it's like 80% Linux probably at this point.
Yeah, that's a fair estimate. That's probably I'd say it's probably 90% for me. So
it's taken over, really.
So, for people that you meet in your professional career, even in your local area, let's just say, do you find people are receptive to Linux, or do they look at you like you're like from another world?
Well, it depends. So for example, when I wear this shirt, the Linux is Everywhere shirt, I get people comment about how cute the penguin is. And sometimes they'll know what Linux is, and most of the time they won't. But I got a haircut yesterday, and when I was wearing, I decided to wear the shirt to that as well, just to see what the reaction would be, and they knew what it was.
Really?
Yeah. And the barber didn't really know what Linux was, but knew what Unix was, and was like asking if it was similar. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And so it's sometimes it's it's a surprise when they do recognize it, but a lot of the time it's people will just ask me what it means, and then I'll explain it, and I'll explain it in the like 10,000 foot overview style. Because the majority of the time, it's sometimes when people ask me and I'm like going through the grocery store checkout line, and I'm like, this is way too long for me to actually explain it to you, and you probably don't care that much. You're just being polite, so I'll give you like the basic. But yeah, it's not as bad, but like in terms of like professional career, yes, designers consider me crazy because they live in the Adobe world, or they live in like Corel and stuff like that, where you basically almost always these people are using Mac OS, like pretty much all the time. Like there's very few people using Windows for that, but they all use the same kind of software. And when I mention that I don't use Mac or Windows, they're like, what? There's another one. I was like, and sometimes they'll want to listen to it, sometimes they won't. But as soon as they say, hey, can I use Photoshop on it? I'm like, well, you can do a VM. That's an option. So that kind of gets shut down pretty quickly in terms of like professional designers. But
yeah, it's a shame because there isn't the time to tell somebody. And when there is the time, they do have them pointed questions. And you're like, there's a way, but you might not want to do it.
Right. And it's also, I've moved a lot of people over, but it's usually people who don't need any specific software like Photoshop, or if they need the software they need is already available. But like with Photoshop, it's really hard to convince anybody to not use it. So the only alternative is to dual boot or use a VM in that sense. And a lot of the people who don't want to do that. So it's just like, that's a situation where you can't really get away from it because like the tools are so ingrained in the ecosystem of the industry, I guess.
Yep. Well, we're gonna talk more about Linux, but let's start at the beginning. So where and when was the first computer that you used, or what? I should say where and when. What and when was the first computer you used?
What? I have no idea. When? Early 90s. I don't remember exactly what kind of computer it was because I was only like 6 or 7, and at the time it was the more common to buy these not laptops, but buy these desktop towers that were from local computer stores. So they didn't have a brand, and I don't remember even like the name of the computer. I just remember it just didn't have any logos on it. I was like, that's weird, because I assumed there'd be something like that, but it was basically like that. And I that computer was, I think, like a Windows 3.1 or something. And I think that was the first time I had experience on a computer, unless you count like, I wouldn't say like, the calculator types that are like the super ancient computers that are technically computers, but not really. They're like, I guess in the sense of like Atari type stuff where it's technically, but not really.
Right.
And I had experience with that, but I didn't really know what I was doing then. I didn't even remember. I don't remember those things. I just remember seeing photos of myself using those things. So as far as remembering, it would definitely be those random local lap or computers that I got when I was a kid.
Right. Well, take us through the timeline then. When do you get your first personal computer for you?
Okay, so that's kind of funny. It was probably, I was like 12 or 13. And the reason was because when I was 10 or 11, we had a one of those big types of computers that are no brand or whatever, random local thing. We had those in our kitchen. And I was in the kitchen almost all the time, every day. Whenever I could be, I was on the computer, and they were like, he's taking, and I have many siblings, and they did not appreciate the fact that I was always on it. And some of them didn't care, but most of them were like, hey, can we have it for 10 minutes maybe? And I was like, yeah, but at the same time, no. So, so basically after they realized that I was that interested in it, they got me an extra one. It was like a not as powerful as the one I had or at the kitchen, but it was like I don't know. It was kind of like an e-machine at the time.
Right. All right. So you progress from that e-machine and you get other computers, I take it. When is the first time you hear the word Linux?
Well, that was actually so during the time I was really into computers very early, and then I found ZDTV, which later became Tech TV, and I was really interested in all the things that were happening. And one day, I don't remember when, but it was in 1998. I remember that specifically because it took me a year to actually try it. But in 1998, Linus Torvalds was on the Screensavers, and he was talking about Linux, and he was talking about like Red Hat and some other stuff, and showing off the thing. And back then, I was like, oh, I can have a completely custom system. That's really cool. Looking back at that video, because I found it on YouTube, it does not look very good. It looks 90s for sure. Like the operating system looks just okay. So when I first saw it, I was like, that sounds awesome. I could have my own computer system, and not because I like had anything against Windows or whatever. It was just, I wanted to be able to make my own and like build up my own system. I thought that would be awesome. So then I go to, and I'm listening to the thing, and he says something about don't even try to download it unless you go to a library or something or college that you can get to. And I'm like, at the time, 13 or 14, I don't know, something around there, I think 14. And he says this, I'm like, okay. So I go up, I look at the thing, and it's like hundreds of megabytes, and at the time that was days of downloads. And obviously at that time you're looking at using dial-up, so you can't take up the phone for days. They would not appreciate that, even though I did try. They said no. I was like, okay, fine. And then like a year later, one of my friends got cable internet, and I went over to his house and was like, hey, do you mind if I use your internet for a second? And they're like, why? And I was like, oh, well, I wanted to download this thing. It's huge, and I need a cable to do it, and I need to burn it to a CD, and I need to like, yeah, whatever, just do it. So I get it, and I put it on, and I take the disc, and I'm super excited, and I can't wait to try it out. And I put it on my computer, which I still had base. I'm pretty sure it was still the same computer, because it like I just kept trying to get upgrades, and they were like, no, you can't have any more stuff. You're fine. So I kept trying to so I tried to put Linux on it, and it was an interesting experience, to say the least.
So tell us about it. What was the good things? What was the bad things?
The good thing is I could have my own custom operating system that I picked and choose everything I wanted. The bad thing about it is that I had my own custom operating system that I could pick and choose everything I wanted.
And you had no idea what you wanted.
And I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was a like early teenager. I didn't know what any of this stuff meant. I was learning things that I never expected to even like care about, like the megahertz of my monitor, like not megahertz, obviously the hertz of my monitor. And it was like, why would I care? So at the time, I basically, there's an example. If you don't know, there's people are watching. If you don't know, I think Rocco, you do. But if you, in the time back then, when you installed your system, you had to know what your hertz of your monitor was, because if you put the wrong one in, it would break the monitor. And I didn't know that. And it asked me what it was. Now, the best part about this is that I got super lucky, because the common hertz at the time was 59, and I put 60, and mine happened to be 60. So wow. I got super lucky. And then after I got it loaded, I started going on like IRC stuff and like mentioning it. And then they said, how did you know what your hertz was? And I was like, I didn't. And then they told me how lucky I was. Like, oh, well, maybe I should look into stuff more often. Yeah, it was interesting. But it was at the time when I was messing around with like different distros or whatever, and I tried probably everything at the time. And I think the one that I used at the time was Debian.
That first one you tried? Is that what you're talking about?
That wasn't the first one I tried. It was it was the one I landed on in that era.
What was the first one you tried? Do you remember?
I think it was either Red Hat or Mandrake. I don't remember which one came first. It might have been Red Hat, that I don't remember. When I tried Debian afterwards, it was like, I think probably around like 6-7 months or something after apt came out. And when I was using it, I was like, oh, this is so different. This is like so much easier. And that was naive of me to think that it was easy. So 90s Linux was not the easiest era to use Linux, but it was definitely an adventure. So
right,
definitely
an adventure. We'll leave it at that.
An adventure. It was fun and terrible at the same time, but still fun adventures.
Now, did you stay with Linux right away and just completely go into it, or do you just stay with Windows as well, or what?
Yeah, I went back to Windows.
Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of like, so the problem with Linux is that it was so complicated, and I didn't really understand what I was doing. And I still tried it, and I still tested out things, and it was still fun, but like after I got things running and I tried to use anything, and nothing existed. Like I couldn't find anything. So like it took me probably about, I mean, I went back and forth, messing with the system using Windows for regular. And then it took me probably about a couple of weeks before I realized that repos existed. And then I realized, I mean, repos in the sense of like the actual term. Because I found like source code that you could build, and I found like RPM files and deb files and that kind of thing. And when I found the repo system with apt, I was like, oh, okay, this is awesome. I have like a little store. It's not like that at all. But so I kept dabbling the entire time. It just always stayed with Windows for years.
How long did it take you to get to the point where you were mostly on Linux?
Probably Ubuntu at 2005, I think. Because I would constantly go back and forth trying out new versions of stuff that came out. Like by the time, like I think the year after I got access to Linux, we got cable internet. And it was like, I don't have to go anywhere to get it. I can just download all these things, and I can just get as much as I want, try out as much as I want. So I had like 15 different discs for various different distros that are, randomly I wanted to try. And for a couple of years I was doing that. And then at probably 2005 is when I actually switched over to Linux being my primary. And I'd say probably like 2008 or 9. I don't remember exactly which one was when I switched completely. But 2005 was definitely like the first time, because when it was the first time I heard of Ubuntu. And when I heard that their goal was to make Debian easy to use, I was like, that's exactly what I want. Yeah.
Right. So you switch your stuff over to Linux. Do you use Windows or Mac in any way now? You're completely Linux?
So remember I told you about a VM?
Yeah.
Photoshop's in that VM. So technically it's 99% Linux. Like I've essentially used Linux as my exclusive system, but I do have a VM that loads up Photoshop. It technically does load up Windows, but it's a snapshot. And when I created the snapshot, I just continuously pull that snapshot into new systems. And that way I'm not ever booting Windows. I'm just loading Photoshop. So
right.
That's how I justify it.
If that's what you got to tell yourself.
Yep. I'm okay with it.
All right.
It's technically not booting. That's what matters.
Well, I probably know the answer to this question, but your computers that you have, do you run one distro, or do you consider yourself a distro hopper?
I technically hopped recently. But the answer to the would I consider myself a distro hopper would be no. It would be I used to do that. Like when I first got into Linux, I did it all the time. And when I got used to Ubuntu, and then Kubuntu came out, and then all the other stuff came out, and then there was other distros that started coming out, and around the same time, I started trying out a bunch of stuff. But as far as like for the past, I don't know, 6-7 years, I've pretty much just been on one distro. Although not now, I'm on a different distro now. But I usually just stick to a distro at the very least for 2 or 3 years. Until something happens. Yeah. Until something happens. Like I think the shortest I've gone in the past few years is maybe a year, maybe like at the absolute shortest 8 months. Like I don't know exactly, but no, definitely not 8 months, because I actually did install 1810, or I went from 1804 to 1810, and then got lazy and didn't upgrade. So it went out of, support by the time I actually went to upgrade. So that was like 10, 11 months or something after that. No, it was like 10 months. Yeah. So I guess 10 months is the least, but at the same time, I also test different distros. It's just not my main distro. Like I stick to one main distro, but I try out all kinds of stuff because I have like a multi-boot thing set up.
Well, people that are familiar with you are going to know that you love KDE Plasma, but
it's all right.
Yeah, a little bit. But you've tried all of the other desktop environments. You've tried GNOME, you tried XFCE. What made you land on Plasma?
Well, the story is when I first picked I basically picked GNOME the first time because I picked GNOME 2 back in the day when Ubuntu handed it to me. And I never tried KDE until Kubuntu came out. And then I really didn't. I was just comfortable with the other one, so I went back. But at the same time, as far as different DEs, I tested all of them, especially, as soon as they came out, I would test them. But the reason that I went to KDE Plasma was actually with the conversation I was having with somebody who was a KDE fan. And they convinced me by arguing with me about Dolphin versus Nautilus, or Dolphin versus Nemo at the time. I'm not sure which one was whatever. And basically saying Dolphin was the best file manager, which, spoilers, they're right.
Agreed.
So, yeah. So they were, I was like, they would say something like, hey, do you have this feature in Nautilus or whatever it was? And I was like, yeah. Do you have this feature? And they're like, yeah. Do you have this feature? No. Wait, say that again. What kind of feature? And then you start listing off all these things that the other ones don't have. And they did the split screen stuff, and they did the terminal thing. And I was like, okay, I want to try this. Like, I'm going to try this. And at first they had me and I tested it for a second. And that was like it got the spark activated, and it didn't really fully get me because I would try it for a couple of days and then go back. And then I had a conversation with a friend who said something like, actually, I do remember the actual conversation. I don't remember verbatim, but I remember the conversation. He said, I was like talking about how my game was crashing. It was really annoying that my whole system would like lock up or whatever. And he said, hey, have you ever heard of window? You ever done window mode in your games? And I was like, yes, but I hate the panels being there and the decorations of the thing or whatever. And he said, well, in Plasma, you can hide the panels, make them auto hide, then maximize the window mode game, and then remove the borders of the decorations of the window. And it's basically a full screen, but it's a faux full screen. And when he told me that, it like opened my eyes to like the level of flexibility that Plasma had. So then I was like, okay, fine. I will give it a week. I'll promise. I'll swear. I'll be a genuine test. I'll give it a week. And then that was 4 or 5 years ago. Wait, 5.5 years ago. Yeah.
Yep. Never looked back.
No, it was it. I've tried different things, and I do like other DEs and various different features, but there's so much like power in the like the foundation of Plasma that it is the most impressive to me. I mean, it doesn't have very good defaults, but it's got its most impressive like core structure. So every time I want to do something, I can do it. And that's just awesome. Even if it's something ridiculously weird and it doesn't really make sense that I can do it, but I can. And that's what's great. So like even now it gets more and more powerful and more features, like Latte Dock completely changes the game of Plasma too.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's like so many things about Plasma that's just impressive. If only they would make good decisions on their defaults.
Well, but that's subjective, dude. Everybody's different.
It's not subjective.
Well, that might be an hour conversation if we go into
it. It could be, but I would say like there's parts of it that I would like. We could argue that it's not. There's times that they do things that are just odd. Like for example, there are settings that just don't make any sense. If you go to present windows and it you loads at all the windows that you have running. If you have a maximized window, it will make that window in present windows like 80% of the screen. And then you have another window that's like little tiny thing, even if it's a decent sized window normally. And that's just because it's the default setting for that feature is natural, whatever that means.
It's natural, of course.
Yeah, sure. If you change it to regular grid, it's 100 times better. Because it actually puts everything in a size that's similar and puts it in a grid style. And it's just, why not do that by default? Also, the shortcuts are really ridiculous because present windows is Control F10. What?
I have to say some of the shortcuts are startling, to say the least. But, I mean, I don't know. There has to have been thought put into the way the present windows were used and the shortcuts. There has to be some thought process in that. It's just not my taste in it.
I agree. There was some thought process, and those thoughts were wrong.
All right. Moving on. So you were involved with Jupiter Broadcasting at one time, known as Producer Michael.
That is true.
So how do you go from a regular guy that installed Linux on your computer to being involved with a network of podcasters?
It's not a very complicated story. It's actually, I was at the time I helped with the IRC. I was like an op in IRC, and I became a mod in the Mumble room, Mumble server and stuff like that. And one day there was a conversation in one of those things where Chris asked for people if anybody wanted to help with the show. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then that's basically it. Like, I just like the idea of helping with spreading the information about Linux and that kind of thing. So that's pretty much how it started. I didn't really plan on doing it really. And then once I started doing it, kind of got, the bug bit me. And I became like a radioactive podcaster.
Well, how long were you with JB?
Technically, I was really a very long time, but really actively, I'd say probably 4 years, I think. Something like that, like 2012 to 2016 or so.
So in this time, and I don't know if the times exactly line up, but at some point you create your own YouTube channel.
Yep.
And you have like content on there, like you have KDE and KDE Plasma and KDE stuff, and
there's also some KDE stuff if you're not aware, people. There is some KDE things, but also don't forget all the K software. There's a lot of those too.
It was funny because when I started my YouTube channel, you were one of the first guys that I watched because all of your stuff was KDE. And that's why I started my channel, was because there wasn't a lot of KDE stuff out there. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. It was actually kind of funny because the first ever video I posted was a GNOME video. And I went back and watched it. And I was like, oh yeah, I did do that. Because I actually did use GNOME for a very long time. And there was this one thing that really annoyed me about GNOME. It was like, it was how the video was how to install extensions via zip files. Because like if you didn't, some people wanted to do it where they didn't have to do it online. There's also people who, like, at the time you couldn't use anything but Firefox, and other people wanted to use something else. So I made a tutorial about like how to do that, and it does not work anymore. Like, it's completely broken now. So,
well, I mean, you also helped develop things for like extensions and whatnot.
Yes, I have. I maintained anywhere between, I don't remember exactly the number, but it was like 10 to 14 at some point of different extensions for the shell. A few of them I found people to take over, and then other ones I just stopped working on.
Why did you stop?
Technically, it was mainly because I switched to Plasma, and I still kept supporting them for like 6 more months after switching. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I mean, if somebody wants to take them up, here you go. And otherwise, that is what it is.
Right.
So I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to bother fixing it every time that they updated GNOME. So that's what you had to do. Like, the weird thing about it is that the extensions were, once you built the extension, it worked for pretty much all the time. Like, and it was just, at the time they had this weird system where, I don't know if they still do it because I haven't used it enough to pay attention to it, but they used to have this thing where if you updated GNOME, it would break every extension no matter what, whether it supported it or not, just because the version number wasn't updated. So you have to go into the manifest file, change the version number, repackage the extensions file, and then reload it. And all of a sudden it worked again, because that's all you had to do. And it was like, why are you forcing a break by default? Like, whatever. So at that point, I kind of got frustrated with that. And after continuing to support it, I was like, I'm done. Like, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, I actually did that manually sometimes to get extensions working. So,
yeah, not the best experience.
Well, I went down that rabbit hole, but going back to your YouTube channel, you produce a show called This Week in Linux.
Yep.
Tell us about what started this, dude.
Oh, well, the interesting thing is that I wanted to do a podcast. And at the time, I didn't really know anyone to do the podcast with me. So I decided to do the podcast because I wanted to do one, and because I already paid attention to all the news anyway. It would basically just me continuing to do what I did anyway, and then turning it into a podcast. And then I did that. And I was actually I was like, okay, I have it prepared. I'm planning on making this podcast start in sometime in mid-May 2017. And then Canonical announces that Unity's going away. And I'm like, how could a news podcast not cover that topic, right? Like, it has to be started now. So I just went ahead and did it. And then later in mid-May, I went to the second episode.
So looking back on that first episode, what do you think the hardest thing was, getting all that together and producing it and putting it out?
It was just like it was the first experience of me doing it. So that was probably the most difficult thing, is not really knowing what I'm doing in the sense of like how everything's going to piece together. But I had a fantastic rock band mic, so it sounded great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about the early days of the show is it was a lot of work, way more work than it really should have been, because one, I didn't know exactly how to do it, and two, I didn't really know what my style was going to be. So the first 6 or so episodes, it really didn't have a flow yet. And then I don't know. It was kind of like, I forgot who it was. I think it might have been you who said something about just, why don't you just do the show live? And then when I started doing it live, I was like, oh, this is way better. Like, this allows me to not get in my own head and just make the content rather than going, oh, here's the reason why it took so long and it was so painful to do those first few episodes, is because I'm a perfectionist basically. So every time I would mess up a thing, I would start the whole thing over, and it would go through. I would do 20 takes on one topic.
I feel your pain.
Yeah, and I'm doing multiple topics, and like, so when I just did the live streaming, I was just like, you know what? Let's see what happens. And basically it just lifted the burden off me of like, it's okay if I make a mistake. I knew that. But when I didn't have an audience at like real time audience, it was, I still fought the idea that I knew I didn't have to do that.
Well, it forces you to get over that, because you don't have, there is no retakes, because everybody just saw you make that blunder that you just did. So you have to move on. There's no crying about it and hitting stop record and then recording again. So it forces you to get into that groove. So and just
deal with it. Yeah, it's exactly that. And it changed my dynamic for doing the show completely. Like, I didn't even do, like, in the first few episodes, I wasn't on camera. And then after that, when I was like doing a stream, I was like, if I'm going to stream it, I might as well be on camera. Like, why not? And that is completely different after that. And it became a much smoother experience. And then later on, it got even more smooth, and to the point now where I'm totally comfortable doing it. It only took 80 episodes or whatever, but you know.
Well, during that time, you were a guest on Destination Linux. And then you ended up becoming a part of Destination Linux. So for those that don't know, your episode of Destination Linux as a guest was episode 18.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what episode Linux Spotlight is for you. we might not have planned that.
Yeah, that was just pure accident. It wasn't like, hey, we might as well do the exact same number, because that's just a continuity thing. I like it too. The Destination Linux was very interesting, because when I was on it for oh my goodness, I'm going to admit this, and I shouldn't, but that episode, I didn't put much effort into my hair. And I know, right? That's ridiculous. I know. Why would I do that? I went back and watched it, and I was like, man, there's no hair gel in that. What did I do that for? Anyway.
Yeah. Well, geez, I went back and watched that episode and a few other older ones, and it's a good thing I walked away, because that was terrible. I was so dry and so like, oh my gosh.
You weren't terrible. You are very different now, because I think it was more like back when you were doing DL, you were it was kind of like, I don't know if it would be like a burden, but like so much was on your shoulders that it kind of turned it into you can't really be yourself. Whereas like for this kind of conversation, you can just be yourself. And the way that you do Biddle is you can just be yourself.
Yes. There's no pressure, dude. I love it.
Perfect.
So you and the other guys at Destination Linux started a whole network now. So the podcast grew from starting out with two guys, and then Brian came aboard, then you came aboard, and Zeb, and then I left, and then Noah came along, and it's grown in popularity leaps and bounds since then. And so what is the goal for this Destination Linux network?
Well, the end goal is world domination.
Obviously.
So, of course. But really, it's mainly because the goal is to spread Linux to its rightful place in being the most known operating system. And I know it's a huge task, but that's really what I want to get to. Where I think that Linux, as for a desktop operating system, is fantastic, and it's only hindered by companies that don't support their software on it. And the goal is to get the attention for the system to be as big as it is, or as big as it can be, and help convince those companies to switch over or not switch over, but addition to, and also get more people to use it, because I think that it, not only does Linux deserve to have that spot, but I think people deserve to have a system that is like Linux, that actually respects your preferences and your privacy and security and everything like that. So that's really the ultimate goal. And if I make some money along the way, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hey, that's always a plus. Well, we're going to get into that whole question of marketing in a little bit. But let's go back to Linux for a little bit. So what is your daily workflow like? Let me ask you this. Is your workflow hardware related, where you're a keyboard guy or a mouse guy, or is it software related, where I got these programs that I need to use every day?
Both. It's actually both. Since I basically upgraded my hardware after a very long time of not caring, it changed how I do things. But prior to that, I was mostly just a software guy. And at this point, with like a keyboard, I have a mechanical keyboard now. I used to not have a mechanical keyboard, and I think I've only had it for maybe 6 or 7 months. And it took, I think, 5, maybe 10 minutes for me to fall in love with it, in comparison to a regular keyboard, like the junky membrane keyboards. Ugh. And I was using those for years, and then the first time I used this, I was like, wait, this feels so much better. And it's something you have to experience, because you can't explain why mechanical key switches are that good. You have to feel it, because it doesn't really make it. Every time I heard it for years, like, man, mechanical keyboards are the best. It's like, yeah, I don't care. They cost like $100.
Yep.
Yeah. And then really the reason I got it is because, Ryan decided to upgrade his keyboard, and he was like, "Hey, you want my old keyboard?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll definitely take an old keyboard." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna charge you like a ton of money or whatever. You can pay shipping and stuff, and then that's fine." So I was like, "Well, that's a fantastic deal." And then I used it and changed it completely. I also got a mouse from him too, because why not? And I used to have like a regular basic mouse. Actually, it even was from Gateway, of all things. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, but it worked, right?
It technically worked. I was pretty much dependent on software to do all the special stuff I did for years. And then I started getting hardware stuff, and I was like, yes, there is a very huge value in having the hardware facilitate some of this stuff. And then when I started doing podcasting, I started doing more things that I wanted to get hardware for, and to get a nice mic arm and all that stuff. And then I got this macro keyboard that I use that
is ridiculous.
Yes, it is ridiculous. It's not huge or nothing. It's most people are bothered by the fact that it's blank keys.
It's ridiculous because it's blank, dude. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, they are. All the keys are blank, and there's like 48 of them. So you have to remember which one does what and when. And also there's different profiles. So you have to remember which profile you're on and that thing or whatever. So it is kind of ridiculous, but it's awesome, and it helps me so much.
So get back to me in a few years when you get a little older and your memory starts going and you can't remember which keys to hit.
That's probably going to happen. I really rely on muscle memory. I just put my hand in, it's like, it's going to be there. It's just where I got to be. And, it works out most of the time. Sometimes I'll hit a key and I was like, wait, what happened? Oh, move up a little. That one. Okay, good.
Oops.
It's happened a few times. During my editing, I have this setup where, you can, in Kdenlive, you can remove spaces, empty space, and you can remove the space on an individual track and also all tracks. So I have the keys for those features right next to each other. And I will sometimes mean to remove on all tracks and then totally ruin the whole timeline, because I do that multiple times and go back and go, what happened? Oh, that happened.
Oops.
So yeah. So it's sometimes if I had labels, that might be good, but it's okay for most times. But as far as like software, I mean, there's so much software that is fundamentally important to my stuff. OBS, for example. Sublime Text is my text editor. I love that thing. I also have like Joplin for my notes, and I think Joplin is a fantastic note app.
Really? I've heard
Yeah.
Joplin. I've heard Barbara and a few others that say they like Joplin.
Yeah, I've been using Joplin for I think a year now. And what I really like about Joplin is that it's markdown based, but also it's the file, the software itself is not self-hosted, but you can actually store the files that it creates on your own server. So it'll sync it to a server. And then when you want to pull it into your phone, you just tell your phone to sync and it will just pull down all the things it needs to get. And it does like a differential pull down. So it doesn't do everything. It just gets what it needs. And the thing about it is that it always means that my phone is always up to date. My computers and laptops are always up to date because it's always on the server. And what the reason why I like it is because they also allow for encrypted files on the server. So even if someone gets access to the server, they're going to see files that are worthless to them without the encryption key. And even then, like I have it on a server, but I have it on the back end of a server. So you can use WebDAV to get files from it. And that's what I love about it, because having WebDAV means you don't have to have it publicly accessible. You can have it on a server that's just behind a firewall and stuff, and use WebDAV to get into it. And it works so great. Like I love that feature. And then people who don't want to host it themselves, they can also just put it in Dropbox. And because it's encrypted, it's pretty much okay too. Like right. I still wouldn't put stuff in Dropbox, but
as long as it's just non-essential notes, you know what I mean?
Yes, if you don't use it like I do, yes, it's definitely okay for that. Like I was actually I noticed the problem, and the problem only exists because of how much ridiculous amount of notes I have in my Joplin. Because I went to the Joplin forum and I was like, okay, I found this bug, and then I realized, well, the reason I found this bug is I have 150 folders and over like 1,200 tasks, and that's why you actually have this problem. So once you get to that level. and they were like, yeah, that would probably cause, okay. And it wasn't even a big deal. It was just like the order of the folders were not like ideal when you use the API on the web clipper extension. Such a random, not a big deal. And it's just something because I use it so much. I do it for my notes and my tasks, my daily tasks and stuff is all in Joplin because it's just so much easier to have it all in one thing. I love that.
Those are the bugs I usually find, the random ones that nobody else has.
Yeah. And then when you describe it, they're like, are you okay?
Yeah, exactly. Is there any software that's not currently available in Linux that you would say, yes, this software came to Linux?
Photoshop.
So you don't have to run that VM?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I would take, basically any Adobe stuff like Premiere, Photoshop, Illustrator, or even like Corel Draw or PaintShop Pro, that kind of thing. Or, that sort of stuff is what I would prefer to have. Like I like the open source value when the editors are good enough to do that. Like, for example, with a video editor, I wouldn't need Premiere, but I would really like to have After Effects. It's like, I don't think Premiere is that great, but After Effects is very impressive. So I would like that. But in terms of, other applications like Photoshop, there's no real competitor to Photoshop. It's just, there isn't one. Especially like, if you're a professional, there's no competitor. If you're not a professional, there's a lot of options. But professionals require stuff like that. Especially because of the non-destructive part of it. But there's things like that kind of software that I would really love to have, but mostly just, work-related applications. There's nothing super special that I would love to have on Linux outside of that, except maybe games, I guess, like certain games that come out that, Epic Games, stop it. Okay, anyway.
You're just mad at Epic because they bought Rocket League.
Well, I mean, yes, but it's actually because they do that whole exclusive store stuff, but their store is not on Linux, and therefore those games cannot be played on Linux because you can't even get them in it. I don't like that company. So anyway, I think that's it. It would be a game changer for me to have Photoshop without having to use a VM or Wine or whatever. But overall, I don't think that there's nothing super important that I can't use in Linux for the most part, except for Photoshop.
Mm-hmm. Sore subject. Okay, moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Linux is pretty much everywhere. I know this because you have a T-shirt on that says it.
That's true.
So
Those can't tell. There you go.
But seriously though, it's in places you don't even think about. Mac machines and POS machines and pretty much everywhere. So
digital menus at restaurants running like Linux and Raspberry Pis and all kinds of stuff.
Video rental machines, like everything. Yeah. But where does Linux stand at in your mind in the grand scheme of things?
I mean, I think that Linux is the most important operating system or kernel, I guess, but even operating system ever made, because of how like vastly spread out it is and how prolific it is. It is the most important operating system, period. And that's because it runs, it's everywhere, but it also runs incredibly vital things. Like 80% of the internet is powered by Linux, and every supercomputer in the world is powered by Linux. Or maybe not every supercomputer, but the top 500 supercomputers are all Linux. And that kind of thing is such an important feature. Even Azure is mostly Linux now. So I think that's what really shines, that Linux is so entrenched in everything except for the desktop. Like that's the only thing it doesn't dominate. It dominates everything else, even phones, even though, I mean, technically Android is just, a really messed up version of Linux, but hey, technically it is Linux. So,
well, I think it's, if you look at it, and there are people who, will disagree with us as we say about Linux dominating in everywhere. But if you look at it, think about it for a moment. If one day Linux stopped working, just boom, shut down and stopped working. If the kernel stopped working, if Linux stopped working, everything would be shut down.
Yep. Infrastructure would just be shot, basically.
I mean, the world would pretty much stop moving.
Yes.
Because it runs through the internet. I mean, it would pretty much stop everything. And I think people don't quite get that. So
I think it's because most people don't see it, because they don't interact with it. They don't see it, and therefore they just think that it's like, one of those like hobby things. And it's like, in the terms of the desktop, it is kind of a hobby thing. And, there's a lot of people who do use it for the desktop and they use it for work and that kind of thing, but it's not anywhere near as prolific on the desktop. But it's only the desktop that has that issue. Like everything else is dominated by it. Even like watches are now, like digital watches are powered by it, except for the Apple Watch. But, that's an exception that no one really cares about.
Really? Right. All right. You went to Self this past year, and we got to meet up and hang out.
It was awesome.
It was a great weekend overall. I mean, everybody that should have been there. Well, maybe not everybody that should have been there, but there were so many awesome people there. You, Ryan, Zeb. I go down the list. There was all kinds of people from the Biddle community, John Euler and Adam Grubbs, and all kinds of. It was a great, epic weekend.
Yep.
There were fantastic talks given by like Eric, the IT guy, Noah, and a host of others, including yourself.
Yes,
you gave
do a couple talks.
2 or 3?
Two talks.
2 talks, one about KDE Live and one about marketing in Linux.
Yeah.
And every episode that I have of Linux Spotlight that I have made, I have asked that question to people. And there's been many responses. But as it goes out into the community, there's all kinds of different debate about when I say about Linux being bad at marketing. There's a debate on if marketing is the right word, if we should even be marketing Linux, if we should people say it's not about marketing because marketing includes money. It should be about promoting or evangelizing. but give me your take on it.
Well, broadly, marketing does not mean it costs money to market it. Like that's not necessary. So for those people, that's not a problem. If you go into posts on something on Twitter, or you go and post something on Facebook or whatever, that's essentially a form of marketing. So you don't have to pay money to market, but you just need to have a marketing strategy. And that's what most of the problem a lot lies into, like of just none of these projects, none of these companies have any form of marketing strategy, like at all. So that's what when I say that marketing is subpar, I'm being generous, actually. And also that applies to not just Linux, it applies to open source. It applies to anything that's like community driven in the terms of like, I want to make this project, but I want to make it for me and anybody else who wants to use it. Well, the problem with that approach is anybody else who wants to use it first has to find it. How are they going to find it if you don't tell them about it? If you don't put it out there and let people know it exists, there's a guarantee they're not going to use it because they don't know it exists. So marketing is a fundamental piece of any form of, evangelism or advocation or just any of that kind of thing. Like you have to do marketing, whatever that level of marketing is, it's still a form of marketing. I just happen to look at it as a marketer that I do it all the time. And it's just, that is a thing that I look, the lens that I use is heavily on the designer side and marketer side, because that's what I do. So when I look at marketing in Linux and open source, I see a lot more issues than most people do. And the problem is that a lot of the times when I want to help with the marketing, I'm not allowed to help with the marketing. Like, because my point is the effectiveness of marketing is cohesiveness and strategy that allows the marketing to deploy in a sequence, in a kind of uniform way, in a consistent way. And the problem is most of these projects just want people to tell them on their Twitter and stuff and post out a link to the thing and that's it. If I'm going to market for somebody and I'm going to help spread the word for a project or whatever, that's not how you do it. That is technically a form of marketing, but it's a very ineffective form of marketing if you really want to push it. So that's really what I get at when I talk about the marketing is not good. And in my talk, I gave like examples of how Linux and open source does marketing badly and also marketing good. Actually, every example I gave that was good, I also had a bad related directly to that marketing. So, for example, like Red Hat came out with a brand new logo and it was like a modern style. I was like, that's good marketing decision. Waiting 25 years to do that is not a good marketing decision. So, like that happens, there's definitely goods and bad. And like SUSE's video, like parody videos, they've made some really good parody videos that were really good and went viral, and they keep making them even though they get worse and worse. So that's, maybe stop. So like there's literally a video called Can't Stop the SUSE. And in the talk, I was like, I kind of wish I could now, So
well, that talk is up on YouTube under the Southeast Linux Fest channel.
Yeah. I need to fix it actually because the audio is off. I'm gonna fix the audio and put it on my channel too, because like it just needs like polishing and stuff. But yeah, like it's a passion for me because I'm a marketer and because Linux is a passion that I have. So combining the two is important to me, and I understand why people don't care. And also I've seen people say that, and I've watched these shows when you talk to people about the marketing concept, and they'll say something like, I think marketing's the wrong word. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you don't think that marketing is necessary, because it just happens to be necessary if you want people to use it. If they don't care and they don't want people to use it and they don't care if people use it, then hey, that's fine. That's their choice. But if you do want people to use it, you have to do it. It's a requirement in order to get more people looking at it. In order to get more people to use it, you got to get more eyeballs on it to see it and even know it exists. In order to do that, you have to market it.
Right. Well, I think some people's problem with it is that word of marketing. They would go for, promoting or advocating more
That's just
so
because
than
it's like a
marketing.
stigma. Like marketing can be good and bad, like just like anything, marketing, there's marketing spin where you say something that's not true just to get people to look at it. Or you do clickbait stuff that's not like, that doesn't, because there's forms of clickbait you can do that is actually legitimate. Like you can clickbait, and as long as you fulfill what the clickbait says, then it's fine. Even if you phrase it in a way that's more likely to get clicks. Like that is a form of marketing, but it's also a reasonable thing, I think. It's just, there are times where I think people look at marketers or marketing in general as, a lot of companies got big because of lying. And there's a lot of scams that are out there. And there's even examples where in marketing, we look at them as jokes because they worked, but they were absolutely worthless. And there was no value in the thing that they were selling, but they sold it and they made a lot of money off it because they just constantly badgered people about it. And I bet you, like anybody who's, I don't know, 30 years or older would have heard of the head-on commercial, like the most annoying commercial ever, because they just say head-on to apply directly to forehead about 50 times. And the reason they did that is because the amount of times you say it, the more people remember it. And they would push it over and over. And after they got to the point where they started making money, they were sued by their claims of helping you when it literally did nothing. Like it's just a stick. It's like putting chapstick on your forehead. Like it's basically that. But they made a lot of money because they just marketed it in a massive amount. And it was basically a scam lie. So I guess, I don't know if legally I can say it was a scam, but I'm pretty sure it really was, because I'm pretty sure it was declared that because they didn't do anything. But it's that kind of situation where I think marketing gets a bad rap because there are people who abuse it. But you can wield it properly and it be a vital, tool in the chest.
Right. Well, look, there are many reasons to run Linux. There, flexibility, customization, open source software. What specifically drives your passion for Linux?
Well, I think originally it was because of the customization and the flexibility. Then it merged into the idea of the open source philosophy, and it kind of like pulled me into the privacy and security realm of it. And now, because I've been in it so long, I think the majority of what keeps me here is the control of my system, but also the community that surrounds the users who use it. Because what other system exists that people are like, I enjoy it and it's a passion of mine and it's fun, versus like Windows is like, stupid updates.
None. There's no other system.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's one of the sparkles around the system itself. Like it pulls you in because it does things so well, and it's so much easier once yes, it's different, so you got to get used to it. And also there's different facets of itself, so that gets confusing. But once you get used to it, you see how powerful and useful and flexible it is. And I think that's what really drives my passion for it, because it can be whatever you want it to be. Like if you want it to look like Windows, you can have it look like Windows. If you want it to be completely different, you can have that too. Like there's so much variety and so much control, and there's so much flexibility that it can be whatever the user wants it to be. And that is a super powerful thing.
Yep. Well, in this community that we have with Linux, we used to have a bad reputation for the community as being
fake news, blah,
unfriendly,
blah, 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 blah.
And there were parts of it that were not so friendly at times, not being welcoming to new users or questions from people that didn't know things.
Yep.
This is improving all the time. I mean, you see it, I see it. We have so many communities out there are open and friendly to join and converse with. But what can we do to make the computer community even better?
I think the biggest thing is just being more open about it. Like, I've had conversations where people are, we even earlier in the thing, I talked about how when someone asks me about the shirt, I will mention, the 1,000-foot overview. In certain cases where it makes sense to do that, in certain cases it doesn't. But I never just ignore the question and move on. And I think a lot of people don't want to have the conversation, even to like let people know it exists, and they don't want to like represent the like brands and like wear like distribution shirts or wear like Linux related shirts and stuff like that to kind of, wear it like a badge of honor, essentially, because it is something that if you wear a shirt like this or something like a distro shirt, you're going to get people to ask you what it means, because it's very different, especially if they have like some, interesting design on it or whatever. It allows you to have like to start the conversation. And I think the thing that really that the community needs, or to garner that, type of experience, is just to go out there and don't wait for the people to ask you about it. If you can, like, be proactive. And wearing a shirt is proactive, because, not every time, you want to go like, you don't want to stand out on the side of the street and with a microphone and start yelling for Linux stuff. That might be a little bit too much. But if you are in a situation, a little bit. But if you're, maybe for example, you're doing karaoke or something, and you for some reason are going to do karaoke for a Tina Turner song, and then you just change the words a little bit, like rollin' on Arch Linux. Like,
you mean like the OpenSUSE videos?
Yeah, I just don't record it. Don't record that. Okay, you're right. I just wanted to make the joke, but don't do that. Don't throw back my own point and back to me, Rocco. That's
I'm just
rude.
saying.
I really just wanted to make the joke. At the same time, I realized immediately after you said that, I was like, oh, that's a great point that shuts me down entirely. But I think that just be proactive about it is all I'm saying. Represent the community and let people know about the system and that sort of thing. And I think that will get more people to be interested in looking into it. And as far as like, how do we make the community more friendly? I think just be open about being friendly is an important thing, and like not allow the elitist mindset to, I don't know, become a toxic thing to the community,
Basically take the time to answer questions and help people. And when somebody comes in, you say hi to them, and whatever.
Just be a friendly person. Like, I think that's the issue. That's a great point. It's just be friendly, take the time to say welcome to them when they come, or take the time to, here's the thing that the best example I have is when I first started using Linux, it was in a period where Linux was not friendly. Like, they automatically assumed that you weren't worth talking to. And it's not necessarily these people are bad or whatever. It's just like they were in an elitist mindset completely. And as soon as they realized how young I was, they were more friendly. And that shouldn't be a requirement. Like, you should just be friendly in general. And I think that's what brings the community has like, we've all come to the conclusion that if we are just, not all of us, if we've come to the conclusion that as a collective, if we are helpful to people and we're kind to people, then they will appreciate that and return that to other people, pay it forward. And every time I on a forum or on a message board or something like that, and someone has like a question and I ever see, did you search for this as a reply? I just want to destroy the thread, like just completely destroy that comment and just say, okay, here's what you should have said. If you searched in the beginning, if you search for what you're looking for, you might find this URL. You can still say the same thing and give the help at the same time. You don't have to be like, I think that the most annoying thing I've ever seen is that when I'm going to a forum and I'm searching for the solution, and every time I find a thread about that topic, it's just someone saying search for it. Yep. Like, that's what I'm doing. Just put the answer in the response. Like, and I wouldn't have to do the same thing that this person already did 3 years ago.
And then there's that neat trick to put the link there, but hide it in a URL, and it takes you to Google search. That's all it does.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's also, like, to be clear, but by the way, for people who do that, that doesn't work because Google now does like tailored search results to people. So those results that you get aren't necessarily results that they get. So that's not even helpful either. That's just, here's another rabbit hole that you could go through. Right. So just be kind, be polite, but, be the way that people should be anyway, and just apply it to the community and apply it to the ecosystem. And I think that would make the so much better. And like, there are still different sub pockets of the community that are toxic, but I think the vast majority of it now is much more friendly.
Yep. Treat others as you want to be treated, dude.
It's golden rule. There you go.
All right. You also have a GitHub page, and you do some coding, you do some developing, some scripting. Do you have a favorite project that you worked on?
Well, there's favorite projects that I worked on for myself, and then there's projects I made for other people to use as well. One of my favorite projects that I used that I created and published for other people to use is Cast for Kodi. It's spelled with a K, naturally.
Of course.
And what it does is allow you to do Chromecast style sending from your laptop or desktop to a Kodi device, no matter what device is running Kodi. Because Kodi has an API that can, as long as it's on the same network, it allows you to send the data. And then what it does is that you say, I want to search, I want to send this YouTube video. You just take the URL, or I think I'm able to script too for like some browsers where you can send the URL to this thing. It will figure out what plugin to use and send that to the API for Kodi. And then it would automatically like play wherever you wanted. And I think that was probably like the biggest one I made for people. I should probably update that, but I think that I'm proud of that one because it did take a long time, and I did build like plugin support for like 30 different platforms. So it's probably still useful. I just haven't tested in a while to make sure it does work. But I really liked it, and I think if you use Kodi, you should definitely check it out because it's a huge time saver.
Well, I have a script that you gave me that helps me out tremendously. When using Zoom and Windows of any kind, actually. And I can run this script and set a window to a specific size for OBS. You put in there the parameters you want, and it's just an automatic thing. It's absolutely awesome, and it saved me so much headaches and time right before the podcast, or right before the show, or right before the live show to get this done. So
yeah, it was actually pretty funny because there was like I think that when I was talking about, someone asked me about a script I made, because I was like, one of the things about my show is that I constantly try to streamline something. Like, they make jokes on DL about how I make new OBS scenes all the time. And it's not every week. It's like every other week.
Even though you say every week that you're making new.
No, they say it every week that I'm making it. I said it as a joke this last week, but the week before, like many weeks before, I didn't do that. But they say it all the time like I did. But I do work on the OBS every week. I just don't make new scenes every week. That's the difference. But anyway. So there's a lot of scripts that I build for streamlining the editing, streamlining the OBS stuff, and all kinds of stuff like that. And one of the things was what you're using now is a script that I wrote that automatically takes whatever window is active and then turns it into like a specific size, specific location. And because the biggest thing about Zoom that's the most annoying thing is that if it's not full screen, it will be a specific random small size that's useless. And you have to resize it. And then if you ever do anything that adjusts the window of any, like if you do screen sharing It goes right back down to the little thing.
Yep.
And so I built a script that would just like tell it stop doing that. And I was talking about it on the post show of DL one time, and Rocco's in there, and he says, "Hey, can I have that?" I was like, well, I wasn't planning on sharing it because I didn't build it for anybody but me, but I guess I could tweak it a little bit and send it to you. Just sure, why not? And then the next week, you start doing Biddle, and I was like, "Hey, how'd the script work?" He's like, "It's amazing."
Hey, I'm sorry. I will tell you if it wasn't, but it is absolutely amazing. It saves me so much time.
Well, I'm happy that you found a use for it. So I'm glad I could ease your mind with the Zoom chaos.
All right, Michael, what do you think of when I say the term "the year of the Linux desktop"?
I think of memes. It's definitely there's the argument of like it technically already happened because Chrome OS, but I don't really look at Chrome OS as being the Linux desktop. It's a desktop using Linux, but not really the Linux desktop, you know. And it's it's an end goal that I hope for it to come to fruition some point, but the year of Linux has already happened tenfold. It's just that desktop part that is the bothersome part of that phrase. So, yeah.
Well, again, this goes back forever of the year of the Linux desktop, and to me, it is just basically a personal thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you decided to use Linux, or you decided you fell in love with Linux, that to me is what that's all about. So
I like it. It's like a personal year of the desktop.
Yep.
I like it.
So if you could change one thing about Linux, Michael, what would it be?
Really for me, it'd probably go down to the marketing thing. It would be like, part of that is yes. Okay. Here's the biggest thing that I have with Linux, and not Linux itself, but the Linux ecosystem around it, is when someone who is skilled or professional in a particular field offers to do something for a project and they offer a specific thing, don't dismiss that and say, hey, you should do this other thing that you're not asking that you want to do. And that's one of the things, like, it's hard to get people to contribute because there's not a lot of people who have a skill set that is that it can have contributions. And there are things that you can do that if you don't have a skill set, like if you want to do documentation, if you just know a software, you can write documentation, but that's also kind of a skill in some way too. But if you say, for example, a designer, I don't know, let's just say me, goes to a project, right? Just random. This is not an actual example that happened to me or not. No, never. If you have a designer go to a project and say, I would like to help you design the user experience to make this the best it possibly could be. Don't say, would you like to make wallpapers or icons? No, because I said user experience. That's a very different thing. And that kind of thing happens. And I think that's the mindset of people wanting contributions, but not really finding a way that the person who's trying to contribute can fit and do the thing that is the most valuable to the project that person can provide. Like there's like all the time, like we need new developers, but they don't look at the fact that there's more than just development to software. Design is important, maybe even a little bit more important, because you can argue that without development, the design doesn't matter. Yes. Without good design, people aren't going to use something. And it's just like, if it feels like it doesn't have that much effort put into it, even if it has a ton of effort, it will have that feeling for most people and they just won't use it.
So what do you think that can be done about that? Like, obviously projects have limited time, limited resources, maybe even limited time to find out what people are good at, or what's the answer for that problem?
Man, these are hard questions, Rocco. um, I guess in this case, I would say if a project is someone like here's if someone comes to me and says, I would like to help you, let me know how I can help you. That part is hard to respond to because you don't know what that person's skill is. So you can't really give a possible way because they have to tell you what it is. But there are many times where people will say, I have this skill set that I would like to provide to the project. And people not allow them to utilize that skill set to the level that they want. And therefore they get bored or they get disheartened and just give up. And I think that's what happens the most of the time. Like, I think most people want to contribute in some way. And it's just a lot of projects are not given the opportunity. And also, anytime I talk to a developer or a person who's like maintaining some kind of project, they make it so complicated to contribute. Like Debian is the worst. You're like, you got to figure out how to join this mailing list. And then you got to send them a specific template email. And if you don't get the template right, it'll send you back like, hey, you messed that up. Like, I don't care anymore. Like that kind of thing happens. Or if like someone says, hey, I would like to contribute to your project. Well, I just go to our bug reports thing. What's that? Whatever, Bugzilla, GitLab, whatever, you'll find it. It says bugs. Okay. Like, don't do that. Make it as easy as possible to contribute and make a contribute page on your website. If you don't have a website, get a website. And make it as obvious as possible that you want contributions, what kind of contributions you want. Like, that's the most important piece. They'll be like, yes, we want contributions, but for what? Like, the project should be providing what they need from the community rather than hoping the community will provide the answers for them.
Well, I'm hoping that I'm not doubting that doesn't happen. I'm hoping that doesn't happen on a wide scale. A lot of the major desktop environments and distros have, how to contribute pages and whatnot. So
sure,
hopefully we're making progress in that area.
We are. This is more of like a historical problem, but also like a grand scheme problem where a majority of things don't have that set up. And there are some big projects that have a very complicated way of contributing. And like Debian, for example. And even GNOME has a kind of a complicated way of doing it because you have to go to their GitLab and you have to like watch the bugs and see if there's anything. And like, if you just go to a page that says, we need somebody with a skill set of this to do this. Like, that is what I'm suggesting. Making it obvious. It's like basically a job board, job posting, but just do it for contributions. And it doesn't have to be a paid thing. Most people want to do it anyway. Just make it simple. Because if you go to a job posting, they're like, we need a person for this. We need to have these skills, this thing. We want you to do these things. Why can't that be applied to contributions?
Right. Well, like I said, with these projects having limited resources, that is definitely something that should be looked at because you're right. We do need to make it easier for people to contribute. But having that, what you're referring to would be having somebody there to coordinate basically.
The biggest thing missing from all projects is project managers.
Right. Yeah. And with a small projects, it's hard pressed to get that. So
yeah, that's fair. I think, okay. Step number 1, make a contribution page, but need project manager.
There you go. All right. I got to ask you because this is an important question. How did you come up with the name Tux Digital?
Okay. So I wanted something that, in hindsight, not the best name because I wanted something that didn't have the term Linux in it because I might want to like transition to something else. And after like 6 months, I was like, yeah, it should have Linux in it. It should, because I wanted it to be, I wanted it to be somewhat relevant to Linux. So I did the Tux thing, and Tux Digital is because it's like a digital media thing. So that's where it came from. But And not necessarily that I have a problem with the name. I think the name is still pretty good. It's just the thing that backfired was I was like, every single video I ever make, I'm Michael of Tux Digital. Now, I'm not Tux Digital. People still constantly call me Tux Digital. And I was like, okay, well, I messed up there.
Well, that all goes back to how I said you have a billion links, because you not only have Tux Digital social media accounts, but you also have your own personal social media accounts, and you also have some This Week in Linux social media accounts. So
yes, those are all true. Pretty much, if I'm on a platform, I have one for each of those things most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite platform? Do you tend to go towards more of a Twitter thing, or do you go towards the open source, or it doesn't matter?
Well, I mean, I avoid Facebook like the plague, because it basically is. But as far as other than that, I don't really have a preference. The thing that makes me have a preference is the tools that I can use to utilize that platform. Like, I like Twitter, not because Twitter is better, but because TweetDeck is awesome. Like, that is such a useful tool. And if anyone made a TweetDeck ripoff for Mastodon, I would love Mastodon, because that tool makes it such an easy, convenient thing to do. Whereas Mastodon is kind of annoying and complicated. I like it, and I wish it was simpler, and I wish the clients were, not toss-ups like, okay, I tried this one, it doesn't have this feature. I tried this one, doesn't have this feature. I can't subscribe to this instance, and there's so many different things like that. If there was just a tool that was like, I think the one that surprised me the most is that how close Mastodon looks like TweetDeck by default. Like, it looks like TweetDeck, but does not work like TweetDeck.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, that's one of the things that I don't like about Mastodon, is that it could be so much better. It could beat Twitter, but it doesn't have the tools needed to use it efficiently. And so I just, as a marketer, I care about what's efficient mostly, and Twitter is the most efficient because of TweetDeck. But also there's a lot of other stuff I use. I use basically everything, and there's value in each one of those things. I even have stuff that most people have never even heard of, or it's been around for so long that they might even go, "Was that still a thing?" It's like, yeah, somewhat.
MySpace.
Well, MySpace is one of those things where it went away, it came back, and now it's a music platform or something. Yeah, but I was thinking more like Plurk. You ever heard of Plurk?
No.
It's like Twitter. Not really. It's like it's like Twitter, but instead of, like, how they call the timeline the little thing in the middle, but that's not a timeline. A timeline is an actual horizontal timeline that you follow. Plurk is like Twitter, but a legit timeline. So it's kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's not very popular. So I have it because I have it. But other than that, as a marketer, I'm like on everything.
Of course. Well, thinking back of all the reasons, Michael, that you originally chose to run Linux, it intrigued you. You could customize it. Do those reasons still apply today?
Actually, they apply more so. Yeah. I think the thing about Linux now is that the flexibility and the customizations are so much easier now than they used to be. It's better now. Like, I think Linux has got to the point where I'm comfortable giving it to anyone. There will be some issues. There will be some headaches in the sense of, like, I need a particular application or whatever. But in terms of, like, ease of use and just usability in general, I think it's totally there. We don't have to worry about, like, who we give it to. They can probably get used to it, especially if you give them a setup that's similar to what they already expect. It's much better. It's pretty much seamless these days, as long as the software they want to use is available.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people?
No, I think that we pretty much covered everything except for single click and double click.
Do you really want to go there?
Probably not the best option, I guess.
Probably not. We'll leave that one for another day.
Okay, sounds good.
I do want to take a moment to thank you for what you've done for the community, Michael. You are somebody that some people will look at, and you can, be egotistical with your hair, and, people that look at things on the surface, and there's a lot of joking that goes along in between community members that maybe people don't always understand. But all through these years, you've done so much contributing to Linux, whether that be from developing extensions in GNOME to developing other projects, to helping out with projects like Antergos and Kubuntu and many others, to making YouTube videos talking about things that people needed answers to helping out behind the scenes in podcasts about Linux, to being on podcasts of your own and creating your own content. You have done a ton of contributions throughout the years for Linux, and I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate that.
No, you're absolutely welcome, and thank you for, being saying such nice, kind words. Like that, it's kind of like when you started listing off all the things, and I was like, yeah, I did do all of that, I guess. So it's the joke about me being egotistical. It is just a joke. It's very humbling to hear, those kinds of things like expressed in a list. So thank you.
Well, that's just some of them. That's not all of them. So again, thanks. How can people get in touch with you, Michael?
Well, you can find my personal stuff. At some point, I'll update the website at michaeltunnell.com.
Wait. You have a billion places to get a hold of you, but really, how can people get a hold of you? Like if they really want an answer.
Best of luck with that.
Okay, good.
I think that contacting me on Telegram is probably the easiest thing. If you send me a message, don't expect me to respond really quickly, because I've had people, I've had times where I accidentally missed a message for like a few days or so, just because I get a lot of messages in Telegram. So if I showed you my list, it would be ridiculous. It would be scrolling for about a minute or two, just of how much is in there. Because I'm in a lot of groups and stuff. So if you want to, be a part of the communities, I'm in the Destination Linux Telegram group, the Destination Linux Discord server. You can go. I'm also available in the Biddle Telegram group. I joined. I'm in that too. So pretty much Telegram is like the best platform for getting real time communication with me. However, I also would suggest going to the Destination Linux Network forum, or message me on whatever social network. I'll probably see it. It's almost a guarantee I'll see it. It's just whether I respond or not. That's I'm not that good at time management, people. So
no, you're not. But I do want to say you were 7 minutes early.
Yes, 7 minutes early.
So,
yeah, which is fantastic, because he was like, hey, I'm going to be available early. And it was like an hour and a half before. And I was like, I'm going to be available if you're available. It's like, okay, I'm going to be early. I'm going to do it. So I barely made it slightly above on time.
7 minutes early for you is like perfect. Okay.
Exactly. So you can't ask for much more.
No, you can't ask for more than that. All right, Michael, thank you so much for talking with me. It was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Yes,
because you mentioned how Self was a really good experience for you. Are you going back next year?
I haven't made that decision yet. Okay. I would like to. I haven't made the decision or the plans yet to do that.
Okay, I'll just ask you every month.
Okay,
till then.
You ask me every month.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, before I get put on the spot again, that wraps up our discussion. Thanks again, Michael, for joining me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you all for joining us this week. as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux. Let's see if I can get the intro right.
Best of luck, sir.
What?
Best of luck, sir.
Oh, thanks. Hello and welcome to the Linux Spotlight. Yep, that's great.
Because I said a couple things and I was like, I was trying to set up a topic, then I messed it up, then I was like, blah, 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 blah. But I left that in the episode. I was like, oh no. Whatever.
Great job.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thanks.